Welcome to today's explainer. If you've ever felt like you're just standing completely still financially, especially when you watch other people around you building wealth with the exact same income, well, you're absolutely in the right place. Today, we're taking 7 of these incredibly powerful but kind of abstract wealth building habits from our source material, and we're transforming them into a highly actionable daily tracking template. And this is designed specifically for beginners. So we're moving way beyond just theory here and handing you a playbook you can literally start using tomorrow morning. First things first, you aren't broken. You aren't naturally bad with money, and you're not inherently disadvantaged. You're just financially unarmed. As the source material bluntly puts it, it's like you're walking into a chess match with checkers pieces and then blaming yourself for losing. The game isn't rigged against you. You just need to learn how to play the game the wealthy are actually playing. All right, so here's our agenda for today. First, we just covered the unarmed trap. Next, we'll dive into the identity reversal. Then we'll break down the daily wealth checklist actions. And finally, we'll wrap up with tracking your weekly progress. Okay, moving right into section 2, the identity reversal shift. Because honestly, before any daily tracking or budgeting can actually work, something much deeper inside you has to change. Just look at the stark contrast in the stories we tell ourselves. If your internal narrative is, I'm bad with money, well, your deepest identity is rooted in restriction, and that leads directly to unconscious sabotage. Any financial success you stumble into just gets actively undermined by that core belief. But look at the wealth transition identity. This isn't just fake it till you make it. It's a present tense identity shift. By simply telling yourself, I make intentional financial decisions, you immediately shift your brain into a state of opportunity awareness. It's a real game changer. And there's actual science behind why this psychological shift is so absolutely crucial. It's called self-consistency theory. Basically, it means your brain has this obsessive drive to keep your actions aligned with your deepest identity. So if you genuinely identify as someone who is actively transitioning to wealth, your brain just goes to work for you. It automatically guides you toward calculated risks, it pushes you toward financial education, and the best part, it does this without you having to constantly force it. You just naturally act in accordance with who you believe you are. So, section 3, daily wealth checklist actions. Now that we have that identity shift established, let's look at the actual mechanics of translating that psychology into small, achievable morning actions. It all starts with understanding another fascinating piece of brain hardware called the reticular activating system. Think of this as your brain's selective filter. Here's the crazy part. If you fundamentally believe you're broke, your brain will literally delete opportunities and resources from your vision before you can even consciously process them. They're sitting right in front of you, but you just can't see them. So to train your brain to actually see those opportunities, you have to prove to yourself that you are surrounded by resources. Enter the abundance audit. Every single morning, you're going to do 3 simple things to apply this to your daily life. First, identify one unused skill you could potentially monetize. Second, note down one untapped network connection you could learn from. And third, consciously repurpose just 15 minutes of your usual doom scrolling time into learning time. Suddenly, you're rewiring your brain to filter for abundance instead of scarcity. Now, this abundance mindset has to apply to your cash, too. Traditional budgeting treats every single dollar like a scarce little soldier you have to hoard, which, let's be honest, usually just triggers binge spending and self-sabotage later on. Instead, we want intentional spending. This is value-based. You're giving yourself permission to spend on 3 specific areas: growth, which increases your earning potential; experiences, which expand your perspective; and leverage. And speaking of leverage, let's define what that actually means. We're talking about non-linear income. This means creating assets, things like systems, investments, or intellectual property that generate value without requiring you to literally trade hours for dollars. A broke mindset is totally trapped in linear income, just selling time. But a wealthy mindset, they wake up every morning and ask, what can I create or build today that generates value without my direct involvement? That right there is the leverage shift. Now, to prepare yourself to make those leverage-based choices, you're going to need this next tool, mental contrasting. Okay, this is not just sitting around visualizing a giant pile of money or a fancy sports car. That's just a fantasy. Mental contrasting is about visualizing the process. It's taking a few minutes every morning to picture yourself making the specific, difficult, and yes, sometimes boring daily decisions that wealthy people make. You rehearse saying no to a bad purchase or taking a calculated risk. That way, when the moment actually arrives in real life, your brain already has the muscle memory to just execute. To round out our daily checklist, we have two really quick, potent actions. First up is the Money Mentor Protocol. Since you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, your daily action is to consume just one piece of content from someone whose financial perspective you want to mirror. Second is failure normalization. Listen, broke people are absolutely terrified of failure, but wealthy people, they just see it as data. So your daily action here is to take one small calculated risk. Pitch a new idea, make a tiny investment, reach out to a mentor, just to deliberately desensitize yourself to that fear of failure.
All right, section 4, tracking your weekly progress. Let's see how all of these habits build into the ultimate printable template format for you to track.
So here it is, your generational wealth daily playbook. Over on the left, you've got your 7 habits, each paired with a bite-sized morning action. In the middle, there's a daily progress column, so you can physically check off each item and really build up that momentum. And definitely notice that far right column, the intentional spend note. This is exactly where you log your value-based spending decisions made each day. So for example, noting down that you bought a $20 course for your own growth. It's a great way to keep your actions actively aligned with your new wealthy mindset. Now, tracking those daily actions is great and all, but remember, the absolute core of this entire playbook is the identity reversal. So down at the bottom of your tracker, you need this weekly identity reflection section. At the end of every week, sit down and ask yourself, how has my internal narrative shifted this week? Did I act from an identity of scarcity or abundance? What opportunities did my reticular activating system suddenly reveal to me? And when I inevitably faced a small financial failure or risk, did I treat it as a total disaster or just as useful data? Evaluating these questions is exactly how you lock in that psychological shift. Because as the source material really wisely notes, wealth is complex. It absolutely involves luck, circumstance, and timing. None of these habits are going to magically guarantee you become a billionaire overnight. But executing this daily playbook guarantees that you put yourself in a position where wealth is finally possible. You're actively removing the self-sabotage. The game itself hasn't changed, but now you're walking up to the board with the right pieces. You have the weapons. Which brings us to our final and honestly most important question of the day. You know, the person who is 5 years ahead of you right now isn't necessarily smarter than you. They just made a different decision about their identity and their daily habits. So, are you willing to do what broke people refuse to do? Take this template, start your identity shift tomorrow morning, and just watch how your world changes. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.